What's up guys, welcome to AnimeKouhai, an extension of Anime Senpai PH channel. All pieces of information are derived from the light novel. In today's video, we will continue chapter 2, volume 8 of the light novel, entitled The Invitees. This video is the fourth part of chapter 2 in our Tensura spoiler video series. If you haven't watched the previous episodes, feel free to check out the links in the description below. If you want to help me out, please hit the like button and subscribe to my channel.
Now, let's get to the video.
Alright, seeing your expression is all I need. Let me tell you, then. Yoshida, it seems, has found a new source for his ingredients. It's allowed him to greatly expand the diversity of his wares, and the quality of his work has improved to match. In addition, in exchange for some monetary support, he's been willing to send a supply of his goods to us.
ERALD was well aware of Kaoru Yoshida. Like his fellow Otherworlders, Kaoru Yoshida had been the subject of much investigation and eventually pinpointed in the capital city of Anglacia, where he was running a cafe and sweet shop. He was said to lack any special skills, although that was unconfirmed. His talents as a pastry chef, however, were undoubtedly top of the line, enough so that he counted the Grand Master of the Free Guild as a grateful client. There were even rumors of Hinata, the saint, sneaking in after closing hours to avoid attracting a crowd. Thus, ERALD already knew Kaoru Yoshida as a successful tradesman, but Elmisia wasn't done speaking yet.
So you know I invited Yoshida here once. Elwin, you see, brought along the most tremendous cake I've ever had. I was hoping I could have him become the Empire's official dessert specialist. But he turned me down. No matter how much money I stacked on the table, Yoshida refused to come here.
The way Elmisia put it, Yoshida wasn't the kind of man who was moved by money. Instead, she made do with having a small selection of souvenirs purchased for her. Your Excellency, what are you doing? ERALD resisted shouting the thought out loud. But she still wasn't done.
Recently, Yoshida apparently sent word that he'd be closing soon. I'm not sure if he's moving or opening up another location. But losing my dessert supply during his hiatus would be a nigh unbearable blow, wouldn't it?
Not especially, no.
That's what you have to say to me? Elwin is quite fond of that bakery, you know. If their wares remained easily obtainable, I'm sure she'd be glad to ferry my orders back here.
What?
Oh, yes. She already comes back here for our regular tea parties.
This was monumental news. ERALD thought his daughter hadn't come near Thalion for years. Elmisia's revelation was a heavy blow. He already knew the two bodyguards assigned to her weren't exactly the most reliable agents out there, but he hadn't heard a word of this from the other observers he had hired to watch over her. He resolved to rake them over the coals about this later, but for now, he had to press Elmisia for more.
This is grave news, is it not?
Oh, yes, it is. But I've used some of my authority and funds to obtain some rather interesting information.
What is it?
Well, of all the places, it turns out that this baker is seriously considering a move to the nation you visited, Tempest. So tell me, what were you doing over there?
This actually jogged ERALD's memory a bit. Every meal he had at Tempest was a delight. His daughter Ellen practically wept tears of joy at first sight of their dessert selection. He even recalled her jumping up and down. Ah, Shuna's perfectly recreated that new recipe, and the like.
Ah, was that what she meant?
ERALD cried as the pieces fell into place. Elmisia sighed.
Are you sure you still have all your marbles, Archduke?
ERALD wasn't so sure any longer.
I am sorry.
ERALD apologized, and he was entirely sincere. Now he saw what the Empress was displeased about. She suspected that ERALD was hoarding all the sweets for himself, something he never would have done, even if it was for his daughter's sake.
Nothing is ever too good for your daughter, after all.
Now, at least, ERALD's name had been cleared. Instead, Elmisia was now busy yelling at him about being totally oblivious to everything. ERALD dutifully accepted it.
But, Your Excellency, how will we respond to Sir Rimuru?
Elmisia gave her companion a satisfied grin.
Yes, well.
She was acting all stately about it but didn't seem too interested in giving an answer. It irked ERALD, but he wasn't foolish enough to offer his own words. As stated, the Emperor visiting a foreign land was a national-level project. If ERALD brought up the idea first, he could see himself being shouted down by criticism. People would get in his way, it'd turn into a big mess. The Sorceress dynasty was established by the Emperor Elmija, its sorceress sovereign, and the 13 royal families and other rulers under her gave her their total loyalty. In general, each family was responsible for governing their own fiefdoms, while the imperial court ran on the taxes they provided. None of the royal families had their own standing armies, all of that was concentrated on the empire side. The emperor was Thalion's commander-in-chief, responsible for arbitrating across fiefdoms and nations. ERALD was born into one of these 13 families. His mother, ELLIS Grimwald, was the matriarch who ran it. This ELLIS was also the grandmother of Elmija herself, the only other person in ERALD'S life he was forced to submit to. ERALD'S elder brother, the father of Elmija, had been killed in battle with monsters. It was an event that happened both before Thalion's founding and well before ERALD was even born. It made Elmija his niece, even though she had lived far longer than him, another reason he owed her at least some respect. What about the other royal families besides Ellis's? They were, to say the least, often very peculiar. Some holed up in their domains, refusing to take any part in imperial administration, while others took advantage of their posts to actively participate in internal politics. Elmija never made any policy statements herself, so a number of local nobles struggled to gain power for themselves instead. As Archduke, one of ERALD'S tasks was to keep an eye on people. That was why he had to be careful here. If this was just a pleasure trip, that was one thing, but many people would fault him for organizing a journey to a literal monster den. It could give them an excuse to strip him of his position. ERALD personally doubted it, but some of the nobles might have even been scheming to eliminate the emperor from the picture entirely. To keep that from happening, ERALD knew he had to be thoroughly prepared.
Ah, you worry too much, ERALD.
Your Excellency?
No matter what those little fish think, none could ever exact revenge against me.
Elmija was changed now. She looked, and felt, like a ruler, an emperor with absolute power, one who never allowed rebellion even once in her life. As long-lived as she was, all the great kings and leaders of the world, even ERALD himself, looked like nothing but a street gang formed of children. ERALD tensed up and nervously swallowed. He could speak frankly with her thanks to sharing a bloodline, but technically speaking, she was far, far above him. He was lauded as a champion of the people himself, but Elmija was on a whole other level. It was impossible not to be nervous around her.
That demon lord, his name was Rimuru, yes?
Elmija said.
We cannot let our guard down.
How do you mean?
She was stating the obvious. He was strong, obviously, and you couldn't discount the leadership he showed guiding his monsters. And there was never a demon lord who tried to build cooperative relationships with the nations around them before. But Elmija wasn't one to verbalize such an obvious point, hence why ERALD asked for clarification. Elmija grinned and said,
This Rimuru, he rather easily accepted our request to build a highway to Thalion, didn't he?
Yes. He asked for rights to things like tolls and customs fees, but he accepted the full construction job on his end.
And there's the issue. Those rights could grant him an absolute fortune. Can't you see that looking at me, ERALD?
She was back to her usual casual self. ERALD knew what she meant.
Ah, those revenue sources?
ERALD, too, realized early on that Rimuru was aiming for exactly that. That was why he thought carefully before giving him those rights. But now Elmija was giving him a supercilious chuckle.
You have a lot to learn, still. Long-lived species like ourselves can plan matters so we profit in the long term. You do realize that, do you not?
Of course. I made my decision after judging the passage fees the Demon Lord Rimuru could charge versus the money it would take for us to build the highway.
By his calculations, any tolls they'd pay would be far cheaper. Attempting to build a paved path through the forest of Jura, as monster-laden as it was, would require countless years and a massive budget. The Kusha Mountains at the forest's border were ruled by the organized, warlike Tengu. Working with them would be a slog, and once you were done with them, there were hundreds of other monsters and magical beasts to deal with. Even discounting them, the complex geography posed a major problem. It'd require tunnels dug through mountains, bridges strung across canyons, and workers who'd need round-the-clock protection the entire way. It'd be a century-long project, and while that wasn't out of the question for an empire with Thalion's resources, it was doubtful they'd ever see a return on their investment. With all that in mind, Rimuru's offer was music to ERALD'S ears.
How naive of you.
Elmisia said, shattering ERALD'S confidence.
Certainly, crafting a highway in the forest is a daunting task. It has never been tried before because there was no benefit to it.
She began guiding ERALD through the issues involved. Just as he thought, there would be no profit from the project. It was rife with challenges, and there was no point to having a road through the forest anyway. But that was in the past. Before, the highway would have had to go all the way to the Dwarven Kingdom. Now, all it had to do was reach Tempest, the new nation in the middle of the woods. Also, there was now a purpose to the highway: trade. Working with the dwarves could have improved Thalion's technology, but there were too many obstacles in the way to achieve that. Now, with Tempest on the scene, things had changed.
That's it for this video, guys. If you haven't subscribed yet, please subscribe and click the bell notification icon so you will never miss the upcoming continuation of Tensura spoiler video series. Thank you for always watching my videos and supporting my channel. Shout out to the top 10 commenters on my previous video. Shout out to Michael, AutisticLemer420, God's Retribution, Tempest, Shubham Tiwari, Ashley Lobo, Brian Prado, Sarang Patankar, Swarup Sagar, Kuan Shuan, Norzki Channel, Ritik Godhill, Stratus Lampro, Kel Rabs, Canaria MLBB, and last but not the least, shout out to Dorje Tamang. I'll see you guys in the next video.